Today, I was actually driving by a white church, and I know it's a white church because I actually visited that church once. And I was struck by the sign I saw in the yard of the church. I think I'm going to take a picture of that sign because it was powerful. That white church had a sign, big sign, and the sign said on top, Black Lives Matter. And then the bottom says, end white silence.
That's
powerful.
And that's what Miss
That's powerful. Did you take a
love
picture?
it.
All the times that they doubted me, and I knew that I would last, and they proud of me. I was down bad, needed you to help me. Had to get it on my own every little.
This is the Black Adventist Network.
With our stories.
In our voices.
With our solutions.
This is a special edition of the Black Adventist Network, taking your comments and giving you our response. We got a special guest, Dr. Godfrey, coming all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. Here we go, guys. You're in for the ride. I couldn't read all the comments, to tell you the truth. So some of you, you might be thinking I read your comment and I'm about to respond and give you a shout out. Not doing it. You know why? Because I was disturbed to actually see a few comments, the few that I read. One comment said that they know of religious organizations and churches that are sitting around a petition to protest the Black Lives Matter movement. You mean to tell me that you're going to spend your energy and your resources to fight against a movement rather than fighting against police brutality and hatred and systemic racism, and you think that's Christian? That's what God calls you to do, to focus on an organization? Because if your focus is on an organization, there are lots of organizations that you really need to be protesting about all day, every day. And I think you actually missed the point of our broadcast. You missed the point of the message. Our message was never, ever about supporting the organization. It's about a movement that says Black Lives Matter. The movement has nothing to do with the organization. The organization has chapters throughout the United States. Do you know where those chapters are? Do you know who the chapter leaders are? We don't. I mean, I do, but I'm just saying we don't in terms of we don't show up at their meetings. When people saw the murder of George Floyd, they showed up to say, hey, there are some injustices here that really need to be changed. They weren't supporting a movement. Let me just stop right here and let my other members of the Black Adventist Network speak on this.
So first, I want to thank the Black Adventist Network for having me on this show. It's an honor to be on here. Want to thank the host, and it's a pleasure to be here. And first of all, I think it's always good when people comment because we need to, in society, understand how to talk with each other, even if we disagree. So one of the main comments that I saw, one of the main themes running through many of the comments was that Black Lives Matter is an anti-Christian organization. Their values don't gel with the Christian faith. And so therefore Christians should not be involved with Black Lives Matter, the organization. Their beliefs are at odds. And in fact, in earlier iterations of their website was apparently recently updated, presumably as the criticisms began to mount. In earlier iterations of their website, they indeed espoused several ideas that ran counter to what Christians believe. You know, for example, the nuclear family, they saw it as just Western, and then they advocated non-Christian religious ideals. So many Christians were turned off by this and said that Black Lives Matter, you know, Christians should not be involved. Well, there are about 4 or 5 points to keep in mind regarding that. Imagine, to use a scenario, imagine there has been a terrible accident, an awful accident. The victim is bleeding out and on the edge, on the precipice of death. An ambulance driver comes, and this ambulance driver is not a Christian, not a believer. Do you argue right there with the ambulance driver, with the paramedic? Do you start an argument with them and denounce their beliefs and say, look, we need to focus on the fact that this person is not a Christian? Or do you, in that moment, focus on saving the life of that individual? Because even if this paramedic is a flaming non-Christian and is a rabid anti-Christian individual, in that moment, we need to save the life of the person. And this is a perfect analogy for what's happening now, is that you have a situation in George Floyd, in Breonna Taylor, and too many to count, others that have been murdered. And so you really have to make the focus on, you really have to focus on the lives that are lost. That's the most important thing right now. The Christian is under several directives from the Bible that saving and taking care of those that are suffering injustice is paramount. Jesus, in fact, promises to send people to hell if they don't do that. This is, for example, one of many examples, Matthew 25:40, where he says that that if you don't take care of the hungry, the sick, those in prison, then and you will suffer the consequence of going to hell. And people say, well, when have we did that? Well, you know, when you did it to the least of these, you've done it unto me.
Really good points. I'm glad Dr. Godfrey is here. Love what he said. Love the points that you shared with us too, Dr. Herma. The remarks or the comments that I want to respond to are in line with some of what you all mentioned as far as the theme. The comments went from, you know, we the panel need to do a bit of research on Black Lives Matter, that none of us has done that. Also, we as a panel, hopefully our hearts will be ready to receive God's truth. God will reveal the truth to us, the panel, as if we are like really off mark here. So there were some other disparaging remarks about us as a panel from folks who really just want to refute our points, and which our points were relevant more to why are people protesting and why is there a focus on Black lives, the Black population, people like us. I don't believe folks watched our complete video from start to end based on some of the comments that I read. Our message was misconstrued, with folks believing the movement is analogous to the organization. And so basically, to me, this argument that's happening is futile. It's rather pointless. Simply put, we're giving our support to the worldwide protests for the unnecessary killings of human lives, mainly Black lives. We are condemning these senseless killings. Jesus had compassion while on earth, and he would not be standing back and doing nothing. The Black Lives Matter moniker brings attention to the cause, right? It's a statement to the world showing solidarity that fairness, equality should be for all, opportunities for all, respect for all, justice for all. So to the folks with disparaging comments or who are focused on witchcraft and the leaders of the Black Lives organization, the devil is distracting folks and maybe distracting you from the real issue at hand. What did Jesus say to the Pharisees in Matthew 22, 37 to 40? He says, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself.
That's right.
That's it for me. I just
So, you
Very powerful.
took my
Professor Truth, Professor Truth, bring it, Professor
he
Truth.
took my talking point. That last, and I know what? Allow me to reiterate that.
go ahead, Professor.
I'm going to repeat what you just said, just to make sure everybody caught that. It says, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your might, with all thy everything. And the second is onto it. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, as I keep that in mind, I'm going to say this to all the comments out there, the negative comments particularly. All of the comments, the negative comments, the individuals that spoke, did not mention anything about the deaths, the suffering, the injustice. It did not mention one. You know what? This is wrong. But, you guys need to, differentiate between the organization and the movement, because we don't want to leave. No, all of them. It seemed to be slanted at a political or indoctrinating type viewpoint or individual that didn't even think in that fashion. So I'm going to say this to clear everything up. Clear everything up. I want you guys to understand that because let's talk. We are Bible-believing Christians. We follow God. We walk upright in obedience to his commandments. There is no spiritualism. There is no witchcraft. There is no anything that we agree with, walk with, hold hands with, piggyback on. We don't do any of that. Strictly, we follow Christ. That's it. That's it. I would like to implore everyone that's watching this, if they're going to watch part 1, to also watch part 2 as we even further explain that. We are talking about the movement, the organization. I don't follow the organization. I don't believe in that organization. I don't, whatever you want to say, we don't subscribe. What we subscribe to is the movement. And the movement are filled with people that, like Dr. Hermer said, don't attend the organization's meeting, don't know too much details about the organization, the founder. There are simply people that go out there that seen a woman get shot while she is sleeping, that saw a young man running down the street and got shot. No one went to jail. No one got charged in some of those. They see these things happening over and over again to a particular group of people, blacks, and they are saying that has to stop. If they're a Caucasian individual, they say, you know what? I know my life is treated a certain way. My life is thought of a certain way in front of law enforcement, in front of a judge if they go to trial or whatever. But these people, black people, seems like their lives don't matter as much. That's wrong. Their lives matter. So they're out there and they're using that mantra, Black Lives Matter, because it's just 3 words. 3 words. Black Lives Matter. I mean, you need to consider what you are doing to these people and treat them fairly. But you are focused. A lot of these comments are focused, and I'm going to stop here, are focused on, the organization, the Marxman stuff, or Marxist, excuse me. No one is talking about that. No one is addressing that.
Right.
And for the life of me, I've searched through these comments to have even more dialogue, to have even more dialogue, but all these comments no one is saying anything about the lives that were lost, the suffering that has been had. And that is very telling to me. That is very telling. And I don't know these individuals that are commenting, but if they are a Christian, or if they say they're Christian, I believe they should pause and really consider where their heart, as though that commandment, that great commandment says, is really at.
think you guys made some great points. And we are reminded as Christians that the life of Christ is the life that we're supposed to exemplify. And we use the phrase a lot of the times, and I don't think we really reflect on the phrase, what would Jesus do? In a situation like this, would Jesus be on earth evaluating, well, I'm not going to go out there and protest the life of someone who was brutalized because the group that is protesting is contrary to my will. We can't evaluate one thing for another. We've all witnessed injustice, and we witnessed it in a way that it's almost firsthand for us. It was recorded. We've seen these things. It's plain to our eyes. Why are we not standing up in the way Christ would want us to stand up? Why is it that we see one thing and disregard it and put value on another thing? At the end of the day, the Black life matter as well. Black lives matter. So we shouldn't put another life of value over another, regardless of the race that it is. We should all be equal. Let us evaluate ourselves, and are we truly living the life that Christ would want us to live?
Today, I was actually driving by a white church, and I know it's a white church because I actually visited that church once. And I was struck by the sign I saw in the yard of the church. I think I'm going to take a picture of that sign because it was powerful. That white church had a sign, big sign, and the sign said on top, Black Lives Matter. And then the bottom says, end white silence.
That's powerful.
And that's what's missing.
That's powerful. You take
Love it. Love it.
And that's one of the things that seems different about this moment is that I remember Amadou Diallo. I remember even when I was a kid, O.J. McDuffie in Miami. It never seemed to spread beyond the anger, the pain, the frustration never seemed to spread beyond the Black community. Whereas now it seems like, okay, and I think with technology, everybody's like, okay, this is just ridiculous. I want to go back to something you said, Herma, based on the comments. It seems like some people are saying, yes, the appropriate thing to do in my paramedic analogy is to argue with the paramedic, because that's what's more important than the person dying. Because if the life is more important, then that's where the focus would be on. And then individuals would be talking about solutions. Okay, we don't agree with Black Lives Matter, but these are the steps we think we need to take. And that's where the focus would be. You know, the Bible says, Jesus said, or I believe John says, they will know we are Christians by our love. That is the key defining factor. And as Dr. Antoinette said, you have to, that was the second greatest commandment, and you know, love thy neighbor as thyself. If you saw a member of your community, for those who are critical, if you saw a member of your community have their life taken out from underneath them, what would you do? What would your focus be upon when it comes to stopping it? So,
and you know, one thing that gets me is that all these people who are still questioning the leadership of the Black Lives Matter organization, why don't you start an organization? Why is it as Christians, you didn't start your own organization? You are not limited to the Black Lives Matter movement. Start a movement, make up your own name. God loves Black people. Stop.
Yeah, exactly.
Just come up with a name. Instead of focusing on what they're doing over here that you don't like, Where is your movement? Because I know a lot of Christian organizations that exist to help poor people, to help with the disparities in this country. And so for every critic on this band network's page about this video that we did on Black Lives Matter, I want each of you to tell me the organization that, or the protest movement that you're going to start to stand up for injustices in the name of the Lord.
Well, here's what I agree with. Oh, so I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr.
I was gonna say, it's just to piggyback on what Herma just said. There was a comment, or maybe one or two, about that, saying there are no organizations out there. You know, we are basically jumping on the Black Lives Matter, the movement. But what about, you know, how come there are no other organizations that exist? And they are other organizations that exist that are in support of issues in the Black community. There are other organizations out there. And I do agree with Dr. Herma saying, if you feel there isn't one that's appropriate for the situations that we are dealing with now, the racial issues, then do start one. Do start one and encourage others to join. I completely agree with that. Very good point.
And I think the critics on the page should band together and form an organization, since they're all in agreement that there needs to be a more Christian view. So come together. I'm really excited to see what the critics come up with, because they're certainly, being so spirit-filled with the Holy Ghost, they're certainly going to do a much better job. So
they could call it the critics movement.
Yes.
So here's what I agree with the critics, right? Here's what I agree with the critics in the comment. I agree. If there's an organization, a structure, a building, a business, LLC, Inc., whatever you want to call it, corporation, if they are deep in spiritualism, worshiping Satan, if they are leading people into destruction, into anything un-Christ-like, if they are up to nefarious deeds that are leaving Christian astray, I agree. Christians should not follow that organization, should not join that organization, should not work in that organization, etc., etc. But this is not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about the Black Lives Matter organization, which I believe I don't know if they're incorporated or not. We are talking about the three words people are using that have no association, that they have no association with the Black Lives Matter organization. They don't work for Black Lives Matter. They don't subscribe to Black Lives Matter organization. They don't go to the meetings, nothing. All there are simple people with everyday jobs that see the injustice, that go out there and say, according to my beliefs, my Christian beliefs, my good nature, whatever you want to call it, we see terrible things happening in this society to these group of people, and it has got to stop. It's not should stop. It not maybe it should come to an end. It has got to. It must. And they are screaming out, and they are marching. They are marching for justice, for equality, for simply what is right.
You know, Reverend Dr. King, in his letter from the Birmingham jail, said that the clergy had written him, "Why are you in Birmingham?" He said he was in Birmingham because injustice was in Birmingham. Why does Black Lives Matter exist? Because injustices were happening to Black Lives Matter. My last and final point, I often wonder if the same Christians that are so deeply offended by Black Lives Matter, the organization, are they more offended by that or the murder of a human being? Which one is more offensive to you? And if you're so offended by BLM, why aren't you as or even more offended by injustice, by a man, his life being snuffed out from him? And this brings me to my final point. Where were these individuals? Where were these criticisms when Amadou Diallo was murdered? Where were these individuals for the long list by list? Why weren't you there saying, you know what, this is evil? Because I say that if these individuals who are so offended by Black Lives Matter If they were just as offended by the actual murder of human beings, there would be no need for Black Lives Matter. So my challenge is to individuals who are so offended by Black Lives Matter as Christians, we have every right to disagree. Shut the world up by showing the world how Christians will go about ending racial injustice. Shut the world up by showing the world how Christians will go about ending police brutality. Vast amount of resources. We have a Bible, a plethora of texts imploring us to fight against injustice. Show us how it's done. Have everybody else take a back seat. And so these are some important points to keep in mind.
All right. So in conclusion, send us your comments and be sure to include the organization or the movement, I should say, the protest movement you're going to start. Let's give a voice to the Christian values in the Bible. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.